Hello, my name is Philip. I am your trainer today. I'll be training on JavaScript. So, probably on our last tutorial, we discussed on how you can get started with JavaScript, all the test editors, and also the requirement before you start working on your JavaScript. Probably we said that you can just start your JavaScript code or just your notepad available in your PC, or if you are just using a computer, you can just, or a desktop, you can just get it over there. So JavaScript is a very important programming language. It's one of the web development language, right? So what we'll be looking today, we'll be looking at variables. We discussed on how you can on introduction part on how you can write JavaScript code. We wrote our first program or if in JavaScript. Then also is discussed on how you can insert comments. We also discussed on how you can write or you can just link your HTML with the JavaScript. Alright, so in this tutorial, I'll take you through variables in HTML. In JavaScript. So let's start. You'll first go to your test editor. On my side, I'm using Visual Studio Code. Just create a new file. Okay, just come here, then you create a new file. Then you can just name it as, let's say, you can name it as variables. Variables.html. So JavaScript is just integrated in a HTML file. Alright, so you just write, okay, you can just write start to generate your basic tags in HTML. So you have the body part and also the HTML tag over here. So we said that we'll be discussing on variables. So variables in JavaScript or JavaScript supports various data types. It supports numbers, it supports string, boolean. So whereby we'll have numbers. So numbers are just like 100, you can have 200, those are numbers. So you can have string is just a sentence or combination of several words like hello world, so that's just a string. So this is a string. Okay, we can have a boolean is just true or false. So those are it, there are only two boolean values whereby we have true or false, and they are mostly used when you're writing your if statement and when you just need to produce a certain condition or when you give a certain condition to your program. Now with that, you can start working on. Okay, we have other data types that are supported by the JavaScript, whereby we have null and also undefined data type. So these are the two other data types that are supported by JavaScript. Alright, so when you're writing your variables in JavaScript, you just use var. So that's a short form for writing your variables in JavaScript. So we can either write your variables into two different ways. You can write your variables into two different ways, whereby you can use by use of commas. By use of commas, you can just write either. You can write, let's say, fari eng, then you have name. Alright, so this is the first way on how you can write your variable in JavaScript. The other way you can write your variables is by use of a semicolon. So whereby we'll be using fari eng semicolon, then you can have file name semicolon. Alright, so these are two different ways on how you can write your variables in JavaScript. Now we'll look at something else different we call variable initialization. Variable initialization. Variable initialization is now storing a value in a variable. This is a process of storing a value in a variable. It is applied during variable creation. When you're creating your variable is when you define or just indicate the value for that particular variable. For instance, we can have an example to show variable initialization. We can have vary, or let's just write our alright, can have script. So we'll have to write script. In between script now, this script, after writing this script now, it shows is a JavaScript program. Right, so you can have here, you can have script type, then you can just write is test stroke JavaScript. Then we can have file name, okay, this is 23. Right, so this is a semicolon over there, then a semicolon over there. So now this is now what we are talking about. This is what we are talking about. Variable initialization, whereby you write your variable, then you just indicate the value for that particular variable. So these values are either called direct or defined later in your program. So you can just write your program, and when you just need to get the name, let's say philo, you can just write variable name. So it will show this one because you have already defined it. So this is what now we are calling variable initialization. All right, so the other part of our tutorial today will be looking at Java or JavaScript variable scope. We'll be looking at JavaScript variable scope. Now, variable scope, variable scope now. Okay, variable scope now, it's actually the types of variables. We have two primitive variables in JavaScript. We have global, we have global variables, and we have okay, we have local variables. All right, now for the global variables, these are variables that are anywhere in your JavaScript code. They are just anywhere in your JavaScript code, while the local variables, they are visible within a function when it is defined. So local, they are just available when you define when your function, or within a function when it is defined. Then for the other, they are just anywhere in your JavaScript code. All right. Now let's have an example over here to illustrate local variable, or just to indicate the two. Alright, you can have script over there, then you can just say type. So in this case we'll have now our first variable, which is my file. Then we'll have a global. This is a global variable. Then in this case we'll just say, so this is just a comment to explain the same. So in this part you declare the global variable. Then you'll have a function over here, then you can name it as function check scope. It checks whether it's a global or just a local variable. So this is a function that we're using, check scope. We'll be discussing it later in our function chapter, so don't worry about it. So the other one, we'll have a fari, then my fari. Then you can in this part you can just say local. So in this part we are just defining what we are just declaring the a local variable, right? Then we can just have document dot write. So this one is used for printing out your JavaScript code. Then you can just define my variable. Alright, now after running your program now, it should produce what? Local, because local is defined inside your function. So this is just an example of a function, then it is defined when the function is defined. Now you have said local is produced or is printed out when it is, or when inside the function when it is defined. So here we have defined the function. So after you run your program now, it will show what? Local variable. So let's see. See now it produces local. It produces local because we have just defined our function, then called our function here. Now it will show local variable. Now the other part and our last part in our tutorial today will be discussing on how to write what? Or how to write variables. How to write variable names. How to write variable names. There are various ways on how you can write your variable names. For the first thing you need to know about variables, they are case sensitive. So they are case sensitive. For instance, what are you talking about? Here we can have name, and also you can have something else like name. So this is in capital letter, this is in small letter. So these are two different variables. So first thing you need to know about variables, they are case sensitive. All right. Now the other thing you need to know that you should not use JavaScript reserved keywords. There are some JavaScript reserved keywords such as boolean. So that is a reserved keywords. So you can have several. You can have several reserved keywords. We can have break. We can have, so this one cannot be used as a variable name. We can have double. We can have do, char. We can have, so there are so many. Devote. We can have something else like while, with, return, among others. So there are so many. We'll be discussing on the same later in our tutorials. So there are so many reserved keywords that you should not use. Right, you can just use your unique name. You can just use any unique name to illustrate your variables. The other thing you should know that variables should start with a numerous. Should not start with a numerous or a number that is 0 to 9. They cannot start with a number. They should start with what? They should start with either a letter between A to Z or a underscore. So they cannot start what? Cannot start with a number. The number 0 to 9 can only start with what? Starts with letters A to Z or a underscore. Now what we call, this is what we call underscore. Now this is now what you call underscore. For instance, you can have either name, so that is a correct variable name, but we can't have something like 9 name. So this is wrong. We can't have a variable starting with a number. So if we just need to make this correct, you can just add a underscore over there, and now you can see now it's a correct variable name. Okay, the other thing we have said that you can just start with a letter. So this is just a letter A to Z. Then if you start with a number, then you can just choose a underscore over there, then to remove the errors and have your correct variable name. So with that, we have come to the end of our tutorial today. Next on our tutorial, we'll be discussing on operators in JavaScript. So keep updated, and I shall be well. Thank you guys for watching.